From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. I am Ben Hall. We have a difficult but important topic tonight. We are talking about stress and depression around the holidays, and this is something that affects so many people. Tonight, we want to hear tips from you about how do you deal with this, and we also have some experts with us who can share what they think will help. And this is, again, something that affects so many people. Happy to have with us Mona Bars. Thank you for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Michael McSurdy. Both, you're the president and CEO, Michael, of Family and Children's Service, program director with Crisis and Information Services. Mona, thank you. So the stress that we see this time of year, it's really about expectations, isn't it? Is that what is so tough for so many people, or what would you say?
I think it has a lot to do with expectations. We expect a lot of ourselves. We expect a lot of our family members. You know, the to-do list for people right now has 100 items on it, from shopping and wrapping gifts and decorating and cooking and baking, and oftentimes we just think we can do more than we really can comfortably. And letting go of expectations is really hard, because then we feel like we're somehow failing ourselves, failing our families, if everything isn't just right for the holidays.
And you have to guard against, okay, so stress, certainly there's a lot going on, so you get stressed. How does that then become depression? And that's a whole, they're linked, but that's also different. Is that right?
Right. I think depression is, it's when stress can get to the point where you can't carry it anymore and you just kind of close down, or you just can't face the next thing. And I think that's one of the things. The holidays are such an idealized time that it becomes really hard to allow anything to not be exactly right. And so that stress, and then if it can't be right, then everything's wrong. And it's really never that black and white in life, but this time of the year, the pressures we place on ourselves really bring that up for folks.
Do you think it also highlights maybe for folks how things aren't right? We're all so busy, and then the holidays are supposed to be this perfect time, and then we feel like, well, wait a minute, this isn't right, and that's really tough.
Absolutely. I think of that particularly in the case of relationships. You know, there are families come together during the holidays, and there are some people who don't have family to come together with. So the feeling of isolation, that, you know, I don't have anybody to spend the holiday with, or no one's invited me to spend the holiday with them, or, you know, my parents and I had this terrible falling out this year, so we're not getting together this Christmas. So those sorts of things, there's a real loss that people experience around that.
And again, all right, we already have some calls, and I want to get to those calls, and if you want to call in, there are some lines open, the number's at the bottom of the screen. Something you said that was fascinating right before the show started. Statistically speaking, when you look at calls to you know, hotlines and that kind of thing, crisis lines, statistically speaking, those calls don't go up this time of year.
Right.
Talk about that.
It's kind of a trailing phenomenon. I think this time of year, everybody tries to do what they can do to cope. And where we see the spike is after the holidays and into the spring. Kind of as things are supposed to be getting better in the world, it becomes even harder at that point. But I think what happens is it's an accumulation effect, and this is a time where I think people can experience the most of that, and then the residual of that is what carries them into having the spikes, having the increase in calls, because it gets harder and harder to manage. We kind of do what we have to do in the moment, and then after the fact we kind of fall apart. And I think what we would say is, I'd love to see a spike now, because if there were a spike now, the spike later and the kind of the strategies people use to cope would be different if they would ask for help now, or really just say it doesn't have to be perfect.
That's part of it, and we'll get into tips, and we want to hear, you know, again, we want to hear your tips, but it would be healthy if people would call for help now, and people don't call for help now, and maybe this is when they need to be calling.
Absolutely. And part of it is everybody's busy. I mean, even people who are struggling emotionally are trying to do something to celebrate the holidays. So there is this busyness, and you know, one thing that we can all do when we're stressed by all of this activity is just step back, take a breath, step back, maybe let go of something on that to-do list. But people don't want to do that, and it would be in that moment of stepping back when there's a little self-reflection going on that one might be inclined to reach out to someone, whether it's the crisis line or a trusted friend or family member. But we don't allow ourselves the time to do that.
We also don't, on the other side, step in and say, how are you doing? Is this hard for you? The first Christmas without your spouse, or that this isn't your tradition, and how are you coping? We don't do that either. We kind of are on our own autopilot, and we don't take that time. And so I think it's, if folks could learn to ask for help, and if people could also learn to help.
That's an interesting point.
Sides.
I think people don't know how to approach that sometimes.
Right.
They have a neighbor
Right.
who lost someone, they're busy, and that's a tough conversation.
Right.
But you don't realize how much you can help.
I think sometimes we don't bring things up because we think it will make something worse. But almost always bringing something up makes it better, because it's that burden you're not carrying anymore. Oh, they know that, so I can, if I look at them this way, they'll know, or you know, we've talked about it, so we can check back in, and that's really helpful. You're not isolated anymore.
That's good. Okay, let's go to David. Hello, David.
Yeah.
Hi, what's on your mind?
Well, I was just going to say that I lost my wife 17 years ago, just before Christmas, and I always think about people that lose loved ones this time of year, and also I've never been able to have children, and so I have a sensitivity about infertility. And one of the things that I did was saw a biblical counselor, and I became a member of the American Association of Christian Counselors. There's a book called Tell Yourself the Truth. I think the author is Bill Parrott. But I try to read, and I try to write, and I try to broaden my reality to realize that not everybody, all of your life, you're going to have these fantastic moments, because you will deal with loneliness, you will be alone, and there will be conflict. So I guess I cope with that, but I also struggle. You never really know the valleys that other people are walking through until you've done enough life to appreciate the kind of program that you're having there this evening.
Right. Thank you, David. Those are some excellent points.
Yeah, they certainly are. I mean, I'd like to say I am sorry for David's losses, and I'm sure those are particularly acute at the holidays. No children, the loss of a spouse, but it sounds as if he has found ways of letting those feelings out. And that is a primary thing that people can do when coping with stress, when coping with deep sadness, is to find a way to express those feelings, because then they don't have quite so much power over us, potentially destructive power. But instead, he talked about blogging it out and
writing and reading,
and that sort of self-expression is very, very healthy.
And I think what he said about you're not always going to have fantastic moments, you know, then allowing for the moments that aren't fantastic. But the flip side of that is holding on to the moments that were. You know, the fact that situations have changed doesn't mean that there wasn't something that preceded that. You wouldn't realize you'd lost something if you'd never had it. And so to celebrate, that's one of the other things, is to realize that there's a lot to celebrate, and it isn't just what's right now, it could be what was.
And he said you reach that point after you've lived long enough to know that there are peaks and valleys in life.
Right.
Yes.
And so I would wonder, are many of the people that are dealing with this, would you say more they're older or they're younger? I mean, I could see how he's saying being older gives him perspective, and that you see their peaks and valleys. But it could also be that being older, you've seen more loss. And so what do you all see?
Well,
when
that's
you're dealing
true.
with that?
I mean, depression crosses the lifespan, the potential for depression, you know, both situational depression as well as clinical depression that really needs medical treatment. It spans across our lives. Young people who don't have as much life experience, when something unfortunate befalls them, they often don't know that they're resilient enough to bounce back from it. They think, my girlfriend left me, I am never going to have another romantic relationship in my life. No one is ever going to love me the way she did. And they don't have enough life experience to know that in all likelihood they will. Life will go on. There will be new opportunities and new experiences. And of course, people who are a little bit older, oftentimes they may be living with some diminishment in their health. And that certainly can be a major cause of depression. And as you said, they have probably accumulated losses, as we all do.
Very interesting. Okay, we're going to take a break. And if you want to call, there's the number, 737-PLUS, 737-7587. We want to hear, how do you deal with stress, depression around the holidays? Some tips that may help others. We're happy to have with us Michael McSurdy, Mona Bars. Be back right after this.